Very happy to welcome Evan Levine to the podcast today. Evan is a super talented bassist, composer, and educator based in Chicago. He's actually originally from New Jersey, where we met. His journey took him from award-winning high school jazz bands all the way to studying at Oberlin and University of Michigan. He's gotten the chance to work with some true master musicians, Kendrick Scott and also Benny Golson. And Evan has a really strong presence on the Chicago jazz scene and the music scene in general. So we're excited to dig into his story. Evan, good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Abe. Yeah, it's great to talk to you. I haven't seen you in a long time, and this is just such a cool little podcast that you have going on here, man. So,
Appreciate you
yeah,
coming on.
of course. Yeah,
Evan, you're performing in Chicago, which is like has so much history in terms of jazz, and
totally.
you're working full time as a professional musician.
Hmm.
And being a jazz musician has a lot of mystery to not just people who aren't musicians, but to jazz musicians themselves who want to go into the field.
Hmm.
What's the biggest, misconception you think people have about, having this life as a jazz bassist?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's a great question, and I think the biggest misconception that people have is that um, I guess that jazz is like the only thing that people do. Like if you're going to be a professional musician in a big city, especially, Chicago or New York, LA, is you're going to be doing a lot of different kinds of things. And the being hireable and being, getting a lot of gigs, being employed is really comes from having a versatile musical palette as well as being able to do a bunch of different kinds of things. So like while I do a lot of jazz stuff in town, but I also make a lot of money doing weddings, which is a lot of top 40s music. And I also do a lot of rock. I do a lot of country music. I do a lot of like salsa, cumbia, timba, all that. A lot of like Latin American stuff as well. And, part of the reason why I'm able to make a living of just playing gigs right now is that I'm able to do a bunch of different kinds of things. And I feel like having a jazz background really prepares you for that open mindedness that comes with playing a bunch of different genres.
Yeah, well,
And
jazz certainly is the teacher, because of its complexity and is with the improvisation.
yeah.
So when you're doing these other gigs, I mean, you talked about that you're doing, top 40 type stuff and you're doing, more pop things.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing those type of gigs, does it still feel the same joy that you do playing improvisational music, or is it like a different mindset kind of where it's like you're just kind of, going with the music? So is there a difference
Great,
between the two?
great question. Yeah. And I think that, yeah, that's a great question. And I think there is a little bit of a different mindset where it's less about putting your own individual voice into the music and more about the group cohesion of the entire band. Um, but I feel like the same joy and the whole reason of why we like to listen to any music that we like to listen to is still there because, um, the whether it be jazz or pop music or anything like that, the reason why we like to listen to music is because we make a genuine connection with from the performer to the audience, and that like is the core of what makes music so awesome. Is having like a genuine connection with people. And although you're not necessarily thinking about, what alternate changes can you play on, this on Man, I Feel Like a Woman, it's um there's really you get to see a lot of like joy from the people that you're playing for, which is really cool. And yeah.
No, totally. And I like how you mentioned "Man, I Feel Like a Woman" because when I used to work on cruise ships, I had to play that song
Oh yeah.
like twice a week or something like, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean it's so much fun. And there's like the I feel like the best jazz music um lets go of this inhibition of I'm quoting man I feel like a woman, but the best jazz music really does like freeze yourself from within your own little box. And once you start to open yourself up to everybody else that's in the room, it starts to be a lot more fun. And it's a little easier to do that with pop music and country music just because the songs themselves are a little bit simpler. But if you can access that same, joy, playfulness, any of these other kinds of emotions while you're playing jazz music, then it just makes it more fun for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's when you do these performances, it doesn't matter if it's jazz or country. The beginning of the performance, the first note you play sets the tone for the night, I kind of feel. You don't want to have
Exactly.
like a you want to always have a strong start instead of having to
Yeah.
like
And there's something to be said about leaving any grumpiness or bad emotions at the door as soon as you step on the stage.
what do you tell yourself before you play the first note on the bass? Do you take a deep breath or any sort of
Yeah,
mental
I mean,
ritual
I
or
think the
something?
most important thing for me is to make eye contact with the other musicians and to make sure that we're all like everyone is not only just like ready to do something, but also just like having a good time. Just like, if anybody is, nervous or tense, then just like making sure that those things are let out in no matter like how you got to do it,
Yeah,
whether
eye
a deep
contact
breath.
is it's such a simple thing, but you know, it can
Yeah.
make you laugh. It can make you
Hmm.
do gigs and you might just like you start looking at the other musician, you start laughing for no other just
Yeah. And that's like why I feel like I was never really given a good explanation as to why all of our teachers have told us like memorize the music before you play, like don't look at your real book or your iReal book while you're playing. Is that it prevents eye contact with other musicians, and it's like that simple thing makes the music so much deeper.
yeah, definitely. And the relationship between you and your instrument is such a personal thing too
Hmm.
that you bring.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you because you're acoustic and electric bassist.
Yeah. Hmm.
Has your connection with the instrument, evolved in the years of playing this other types of music?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, great question. I think that um, for a long time, I only played electric bass for fun, and I like considered myself to be like a serious study of the upright bass, and um, and I never took the electric bass stuff that seriously. But then now I do about 50% of the gigs on electric bass and 50% of the gigs on upright bass. And I've had to sort of do a little bit of catch up and really spend some time learning the instrument as well as I do the upright bass. And I feel like they both have different things that they're better at, and they both have different sounds and different palettes, even though they're the same instruments that are tuned exactly the same. Um, they just have such different sounds that it really helps to broaden my horizons into what I'm capable of doing. Um, but yeah, they're both super fun. And now that I feel more confident with my electric bass playing than I did earlier. That I can have the same looseness and um, and just like you know being able to let go on both of
I
them.
have another question I wanted to ask you too.
Sure.
We were talking before we started the chat, and you told me, you're playing. That's you're you're a full-time professional, just
Mhm.
playing.
Yeah.
Um, that seems like a lot of fun, and it's hard to also like you want to not get burnt out as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that being said, when you're working, so much performing. you kind of have to like take a break from the practicing and not, and during the day just kind of like sort of just enjoy yourself because
Oh
the
yeah.
idea of playing every night or every other night or something, it's like I kind of feel like it creates this big just joyous state. So,
Mhm.
walk us through like a day-to-day thing to keep because you don't want to get burnt out.
Yeah, and I've definitely been in that place where I burned myself out before. I think specifically um, when like 2021, like the pandemic was still kind of happening, but basically all of the weddings from 2020 that got pushed back because of the pandemic, they got pushed into 2021 and 2022. I ended up doing like 3 or 4 weddings a weekend for a couple
Oh
of months.
my God.
And it was like, I think I counted in 2021 from October to December, I did 50 weddings.
Wait,
And
quick question. Was the with the
yeah,
weddings, those were like the full 4 hour type things, five
oh yeah,
hours?
yeah. Full
So
like 3 hour long sets, or however you want to divide it up. Different bands have different ways of doing it, but yeah, I mean, some of them are 3 80-minute sets, or 3 hour long sets, or some I've done a couple where it's like continuous for 3 or 4 hours with no breaks, which the money is always a lot better, but it's exhausting. But yeah, so I like really burned myself out after doing that, and I took like a month and a half off of playing. And there was I've found that saying yes to everything is not always good, and there's um this feeling of having your self-worth being connected to how busy you are that is really unhealthy when you start to be asked to do a lot of different things, and it's really really easy to stretch yourself too thin and to burn yourself out to the point where the joy that we were talking about earlier is it doesn't feel real anymore. It feels forced. And now I feel like I have a lot more of a healthy balance, not only of just like I feel okay saying no to gigs if I don't want to do them, but
you learn by
I have my
saying no. You learn by
yeah,
saying no.
yeah, and I have my little system of like what makes me say yes to a gig. Basically, I think about it as like you have a Venn, like the three Venn trio diagram, where it's if you have three things that are really important to me, it's the music itself, the hang or the people that go into the music and the environment that you're in, and then the money. And if the two of the three things are there, then I'll probably say yes to the gig.
Yeah.
But
How do
if
you deal
it's
with people who, because we've all just been forced to work with people that aren't the nicest and
yeah.
like I remember like I'll give you an example. Like when I worked on cruise ships the first 2 times,
Mhm.
it was amazing. Like the musicians were fun and we all just like kind of hung out. But then the third time, the musicians were just not cool. They were just
Yeah,
so yeah, I ended up like I'm like, at one point I'm getting out of here.
yeah,
How do how do you deal with that? Because you can't like what makes you through the like how do you get through the gig when there's someone in the band who you're not like, vibing with?
yeah. I mean, I right out of college, I did a cruise ship like contract also, and I had a really terrible experience with it. And like I don't want to talk that much about it just because it got really dark, but needless to say, I think that um generally um like part of the music, the hang and the pay thing is if there's somebody that I really don't like or someone that I really don't vibe with, I generally will, avoid that person unless the music and the money are really good. And then it's either grin and bear it and just, have the thought in your mind that it's just like, well, I said yes to this. So I have to do a job,
Yeah.
and the money's going to be good at the end of the day, or the music's going to be really good at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
if the money's good enough and it's a lot, you're like, oh,
You
here's happy
can
getting the
say,
money.
yeah, I've done a lot of things for for the money that I necessarily wouldn't be proud of sharing, but or just like, because it was like a bad time. But I think that, in any profession, you're always going to have to work with people that you don't 100% agree with. Sometimes some things more than other things, but um, I think that knowing that you guys are all in it for the same reasons, just that you really love music, is helps to put things into perspective, and having a little empathy goes a long way. But we all have people that are like too bad to like deal with, and sometimes you don't know until you get on the gig that it's someone that you really don't like. But that's unless it's a gig situation where it's you have to show up really early and then just hurry up and wait for a couple hours, then usually you can just sort of like get in and get out, and
Yeah.
like not interact with the people that stress you out. And yeah, just like trying to like not not be argumentative, and just like be cool and be chill, and just like avoid any kind of stressful conversations goes a long way. And it's not a perfect situation, but in any field, you're always going to have to deal with people that you don't like.
Absolutely. And let's backtrack a little bit
Sure.
because, you have to make this decision. It's not an easy decision to make. It's
Hmm.
the to become a professional musician is like, the same type of decision as getting married or, opening a business or
Right. Hmm.
when did you know that this was what you were going to do? Was there a specific moment where you're like, okay, now I know what I want to do? Or did it kind
Yeah.
of talk
Yeah.
about that? Yeah.
Sure. So I mean, I think it was like when I was in high school. I had played guitar for such a long time. Like, I started when I was like 9 years old, and I really enjoyed it, and I got a lot of joy out of it. And I really liked practicing, which is unusual. But yeah, I loved my like Eddie Van Halen things, and um, all of that fun stuff. But basically, like there was an upright bass that was in my high school that I took home one day and started learning how to play it. And then almost immediately, I started getting called for gigs. Now that like I played upright bass, and in like a lot of the local like Union County, Somerset County, New Jersey, like there's like a little jazz scene there. And it's maybe it was that there was a scarcity of bass players and they really needed someone. But it was like like I was making more money doing that, working one gig than I would working a week at Urban Outfitters. And then I started teaching guitar lessons and bass lessons also, and it was like, wow, this is like a better, like I have so much more fun doing this than folding clothes and trying to get people to not steal things from the dressing room.
It's funny.
Um,
I really liked retail, but the pay sucked,
oh, the pay is terrible. I mean, it's the thing that's cool about retail is just the people that you work with are oftentimes really cool. Yeah, and I've had a bunch of different kinds of jobs over the years, and I've done retail, I've done telemarketing, I worked for the U.S. Census for a while, and yeah, it's like they were all fine, but I always left those jobs feeling way more drained and like super exhausted. But when I do, I mean, I'm sure you experience this too. When you have a really good gig, you can leave feeling more energized and like with more energy than you came
Yeah,
into
you
it with.
can't go to sleep.
Yeah, and that's like so cool. And that's not going to be every single gig that you do, but the ones that are that way are so much fun that it's totally worth doing it full time to chase that.
That's such a cool thing that you got to do these like gigs that paid the same, do it for like 1 hour, then they would pay the same that versus the retail, and you're kind of like, oh, you know what? This is where it's at. That's I think that's really cool,
Yeah,
actually.
I mean, like, when I was working at Urban Outfitters, it was $10 an hour, which is like if you get paid $100 gig, that's like you know, half of a part-time work week right there. And then, they also like take out all the taxes and stuff like that from,
Oh
which
yeah,
is good.
definitely.
It's all good, but and you pay your taxes on the other end for the musician thing, um but yeah, it's just it felt more right. And then as I got better at my instrument, I started getting called for better gigs and more things, and it had this snowball effect to where, even though when I went to college at Oberlin, I was still able to do gigs in Cleveland, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And it was like, yeah.
Yeah, the Midwest is, Chicago and,
Mhm.
Ohio is such a great,
Dude,
great
there's
place.
so much history, musical history that's from like Chicago and Detroit. Um, like so many of our heroes that we grew up listening to are from the Midwest. And I think that, besides, you could make an argument for, well, there's like nothing here, so there's a lot more time to practice, but, not necessarily with cities. But there's just like every geographical location has their like specific things. And I've always found it really interesting to kind of like learn what makes, Chicago musicians so great versus what makes musicians from New Jersey so great versus New York. And there are kind of different geographical things going on that are really, really cool. And those are the kinds of things that are hard to see when you are like on Instagram or, viewing reels or YouTube videos of these people. But there are definitely something like when you see a musician in person that you get a better idea of those things that make up their individual musical DNA.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I wish we had gotten the chance to play more when we're in New
I
Jersey.
know.
Now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, um, New Jersey has so many great musicians there, and like, there's I remember it being just like a very healthy community, especially like the New Brunswick area, Asbury Park area. There Like those are the places that I spent a lot of time in, and I always had a lot of fun because there were great musicians, there were great mentors, and there was a general feeling of importance with the music, and that it felt really great. So it's yeah.
No, that's great. And you talked about, you mentioned the word, I think, mentor, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Who's really been a mentor for you, that you'll always be able to look back on? Without that person, you would not be the musician you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think from New Jersey, I'm sure you've met Jim Jason at some point. Just he's like a piano player that lives in the like Somerset area, but he was really the first person to call me for gigs, and I have a lot of appreciation for him for that, and just like being able to trust this little 16-year-old kid. Um, and not all the gigs were great, but they were important in terms of just getting playing experience out there. And he was, and he treated me like a friend and not like a little kid, which I thought was really, really cool. And then, once I moved away to college and grad school and stuff like that, I was able to spend some time studying at University of Michigan with Bob Hurst, who was in Branford Marsalis's band and the Tonight Show band, and did a whole bunch of other things. And it was just really cool to see someone who I looked up to for a really long time and get a chance to really pick his brain. And then Benny Green also was a big teacher up there. It was one of the first records that I ever got was that Testifying Live at the Village Vanguard with Benny Green, Christian McBride, and Carl Allen, and just to get to not only um, get to like study music with him, but also just to see the humanity and the humility, and just to sort of make the connection that these people that we look up to are just real people that have the same problems that the rest of us do.
It's so hard not to look at that. Like I remember like going to grad school and like I was just like in the room with Chris Potter and I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm like you know like felt like you're in front of like the most important person in the world or something.
right. And then you can get a beer with them or it's
Yeah, yeah.
and then it's just like, oh, this is like there's um sometimes it's just like the they're real people, but they've had these opportunities and they've been in these situations which has elevated them to the point where they are. And it doesn't always happen. There's this common misconception that like these super famous musicians have just started super early and have just always been as good as they are. But everybody has had to work on it. Everybody's had a bunch of growth, and some people start later than others. And like I'm trying to think of a good example of, but there are a lot of musicians who really start get their feet off the ground in their 30s and 40s, and that's okay.
Yeah,
Like
well,
it's
one thing you talked about was the guy you worked with in Somerset, the piano player. He didn't treat you like a little kid. He treated you like a professional.
yeah,
And I've
totally.
always felt that with music, there's like age, well, for age is only a number in general, but like there's musicians who are, just as good as, if not better, who were in their 20s as people who were in their 40s. They're just as good, if not, or just the same, and they may not be treated the same way because the person's a little older or something like that.
Yeah,
I have a problem with that, so that's just my tell. Just want to get your thoughts on that.
yeah, and I think that um respecting your elders is like a good platitude to have, but I don't think I think that um once the music starts playing, it shouldn't really matter that much. But
Definitely.
there's I think that everybody has something that they can teach other people. Like everybody has their thing that they're really passionate about, that they're really good at, or just that they really enjoy talking about. Like set aside music any moment. Like if you can, if you're just talking with anybody and you can get them on a conversation of something that they're really passionate about, it becomes way more fun to have a conversation with that person, whether it be, rock climbing or cycling or a sport or art, like some people are really into painters and sculptors and, or YouTube people or whatever. Um, it's that passion is like sometimes more important than the time that's been put in. Um, I mean, I'm sure, you've seen it. I've seen a bunch of it where you have musicians that are really, really great, but they're so jaded and so clearly exhausted and that they don't want to be there, that it's not as fun and it's like not it becomes a drag as
Yeah,
opposed
I've
to
seen
playing
like heroes
young.
play and they're like just, you know, burnt out and it's like it's you leave the
Yeah,
concert not feeling uplifted. You feel like kind of
you
sad.
feel yeah, and it's like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, like you don't want to bring any bad emotions to the stage, and that's kind of why is like as an audience member that stuff is palpable. You can feel it when someone's having a really bad day sometimes, um and it's hard to let that go, and it's really easy to let that be to overwhelm you when you're burnt out or when you don't want to be there, and it's yeah, and I think that while there are a lot of older musicians that I work with that are really fun and bring a lot of joy into the music, there are also a lot that have just been doing it for too long and feel stuck in it, and like they feel like I'm such and such years old, I'm too old to change and do something else that I really wanted to do, and I'm only doing weddings all the time because it's the only thing that pays and blah blah blah. But um yeah, and it sucks. Long story short, but yeah, it's I feel like some of the um that age is cool, and experience is really a wonderful teacher, but that you can't let it yeah, it's I would rather work with young musicians that are bright-eyed and aren't necessarily as established or as good than someone who's been on the scene for 30, 40 years that just hates being there.
Yeah, like it's like if I was thinking about a bass player and I'm like, well, I could probably call like some younger person who can play with good time, outline the changes, may not be the best soloist or something
Right. Hmm.
versus someone who's like gonna come and they can really like they're like a true, professional and have all this technique and stuff, but it won't be as fun.
Yeah, and I think that once you start like being in the professional world, that the things that are the most important and the things that make you the most hireable are oftentimes the things that are pretty easy to do if you think like that you don't have to work on. It's not how fast can you play your arpeggios, how many alternate chord changes do you know, but it's like, do you show up on time, do you listen to the music beforehand, um, do you have a good attitude? Like those things makes are so much higher of priority
Yeah. I hope
than.
my attitude came across good for you when we played
Oh
back.
yeah, totally. No,
Yeah.
that was always a good time, man. And
Yeah.
it was I always felt really relaxed when we got to play together. Because we mostly played in like duo situations too,
Yeah, it's
which
like
is
just enjoy. We're gonna play
fun.
and make some music happen, you know?
Yeah, and yeah, and it's like the things that I feel like have been able to make me very hireable, and why people keep calling me for gigs is, not necessarily that I'm the best player in the world, but it's just that I try and bring this lighthearted, brevity to the situations, and that makes people more relaxed.
No, you have a great attitude. You're super professional. You can, play the hell out of the instrument and,
Thank you.
and you have a lot of great insights there. I want to thank you for coming on and, you're always
Yeah,
welcome
man.
to and where can everyone find you if they want to follow you or
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that my social media stuff, on Instagram, I'm the most active, super mean Evan Levine. And on Facebook, you can just, Evan Salvacion Levine is where I'm at. And yeah, I mean, I'm mostly right now, I'm doing a lot of sideman work, but I do have like a piano trio called Del Trio, which is slowly putting out some stuff. And yeah, but all that stuff will be on my socials.
so
So
definitely follow Evan on social media and hire him
yeah,
100%. He's the man.
yeah, awesome. Yeah, dude. Abe, was great seeing you. This is such a cool little podcast, and I'm
Oh
glad
yeah,
that
I'm sure we'll definitely play again. I
yeah,
appreciate you being.
I'll let you know when next time I'm in New Jersey for holidays, or just if I happen to be there. My parents just got a puppy, so I need to like make an excuse to get out there more often, because
That's the
that's
perfect excuse.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, man, awesome. Well, great.